Hi guys, welcome back to Awana. I am so glad to have you with us again this week. Guys, we are in our last month of Awana, which is so crazy. I can't believe this Awana year is almost over already. I am so proud of you guys for working through your books. Some of you are already finished, but don't worry if you're not. We still have 4 more weeks left of reciting verses. And so make sure to keep working at your book and memorizing those verses. Becky and I are almost done going through Skystormer, and then next year we're going to start TNT books with you guys as well. So we have been enjoying doing this along with you this year as well. And so before we get into our questions from kids, we are going to go sing a song. And so we are going to go sing one of my all-time favorite Go Fish Guy songs, Stories.
Na 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 na. 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 Come on. Na 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 na. Everybody, everybody. Na 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 na. Come on. Na 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 na. Everybody, everybody. Na 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 na.
Zacchaeus was a wee little man, and a wee little man was he. He climbed up in a sycamore tree, for the Lord he wanted to see. And as the Savior passed that way, he looked up in the tree, and he said,
Zacchaeus, you come down.
For I'm going to your house today. For I'm going to your house today. These are the stories in the Bible. B-I-B-L-E. These are the stories in the Bible, straight from God to you and me.
Only a boy named David, only a little brook. Only a boy named David, 5 little stones he took.
And one little stone went in the sling, and the sling went around and around, and around 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 and around. And one little stone flew right in the air,
And the giant came tumbling down.
These are the stories in the Bible. B-I-B-L-E. These are the stories in the Bible, straight from God to you and me.
Come on. Na 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 na. Everybody, everybody. Na 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 na. Come on. Na 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 na. Everybody, everybody. Na 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 na.
Some people don't believe it's true, but here's a little secret between me and you. One day every knee is gonna bow, and everybody else will know what you know now. These are the stories in the Bible. B-I-B-L-E. These are the stories in the Bible, straight from God to you and me. These are the stories in the Bible. B-I-B-L-E. These are the stories in the Bible, straight from God to you and me.
Come on. Na 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 na. Everybody, everybody. Na 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 na. Come on. Na 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 na. Everybody, everybody. Na 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 na. Come on. Na 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 na. Everybody, everybody. Na 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 na. Come on. Na 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 na. Everybody, everybody. Na 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 na. Come on. Na 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 na.
Okay, it is now time for our questions from kids. So I'm going to be answering a question that one of you has sent in to me. And today's question is quite a doozy. It comes to us from Olivia B. And she asks, if God always existed and time had a beginning, how does that make sense? Great question, Olivia. And that is a tough one. It really doesn't make sense, does it? Have you guys ever thought of that before? How time had a beginning, but God has always been here. So how do those two things really work together and line up? It can be very confusing. So before we get into our answer, I want us to look at the Bible and see what it says about God always existing. So we're going to look at a couple different verses. And first we're going to look at Isaiah chapter 44, verse 6. And it says, "Thus says the Lord, the King of Israel and his Redeemer, the Lord of hosts. I am the first and I am the last, and there is no God besides me." So here God is speaking and he says, I am the first and I am the last, meaning like he's always existed. He's always been here. And maybe you've heard this phrase before that God says, I am the Alpha and the Omega. And this means the beginning and the end. And it is the Greek alphabet. So Alpha is actually like their letter A and Omega is like their letter Z. It's like the beginning of the alphabet and the end of the alphabet. So God uses that to describe him because he's saying like he's always been here. And then another one is Psalm chapter 90, verse 2, which says, "Before the mountains were born or you brought forth the whole world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God." So it says here that God is everlasting. So what does that mean? Well, it's kind of right in the word. Everlasting means lasting forever. Like he's always been here. He's never going to die. He's never going to end. And then finally, 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 17 says this, "Now to the King, eternal, immortal, invisible, the only God, be honor and glory forever and ever. Amen." So it says here that God, our King, is eternal, which means lasting forever or existing forever without beginning or end. So now you're right, Olivia, this is very confusing. It's confusing for me as well, and it really doesn't make sense. Do you guys know why it doesn't make sense to us? Well, it's because we as humans have a beginning and an end. A lot of the things on this earth have a beginning and end. So we can't comprehend how something could last forever because we don't last forever. All of us have a beginning and an end. When is your birthday? My birthday was actually just this past week. It was on Thursday. So my birthday is April 29th, 1996. That was the day that I was born, that I came into this world, and that was my beginning. Now, I don't know what my end is yet because we don't know when we're going to die, but most likely I will die one day. All of us are going to die one day unless Jesus comes back before that and we meet him up in heaven before we die. But for most of us, we have a beginning and we have an end. Maybe you guys have been to a cemetery before and you've seen on the tombstone that they have 2 different years on it. They have the year that the person was born and then the year that the person died. So let's say I live until 2040. So then my tombstone would say 1996 until 2040 because that is my beginning and that is my end. But now God doesn't have a beginning and an end. So this is so confusing to us. And it, to be honest, kind of hurts my brain to think about. Now, Olivia mentioned that time had a beginning, and she's right. That's another thing that has a beginning. And we know this from Genesis, the very first verse in the whole Bible, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. It says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." And so this was the beginning of time for us. And when God created the whole earth, time then began. But then how could God exist before that? How could he exist before time began? Well, this isn't something that we're ever fully going to understand. And you know what? That's okay. We don't have all the answers. Our human brain can't comprehend everything. It doesn't know everything because only God knows everything. If we knew everything, we wouldn't need God anymore. It's kind of like if you knew all the answers to everything in school, if you knew how to do all the math, all the science, all the English, all the different subjects, you wouldn't need a teacher anymore because you wouldn't need someone to teach you. You wouldn't need someone to give you the answers when you had a question. And the same is true with God. If we had all the answers, we wouldn't really need him anymore, would we? But that's why we have God. He knows everything. And so he can help us understand different things that we don't understand, but also there are just some things that only God is going to know. We as humans can't understand them. Now, with that said, I am going to show you something that has helped me understand a little bit more how God has always existed. And it's not a perfect example, but it helps us understand it a little bit more. So I actually have some props here. Okay, so I want us to pretend that this is a timeline, okay? Have you guys ever seen a timeline before where it shows how different things happened throughout time, hence why it's called a timeline? So we're gonna pretend that at the beginning here, this is the beginning of time. This is where it all started, okay? And so, if this is the beginning of time, this is when God created the earth. I'm gonna move it so you guys can see it a little bit more. So this is the beginning. This is when God created the earth. So this is when time began for us as humans, okay? And then we read in the Bible that years and years and years and years and years and years later, Jesus came to the earth as a baby, and he was born in a manger, and this is what we celebrate at Christmas time. And then about 33 years later or so, when Jesus had been on the earth for 33 years, he then died on the cross. And so this happened a little later on. And then tons and tons of years later, almost 2,000 years later, guess what happened? I was born. So I was born, like we said, in 1996. And then a few years later, not that many years later, you guys were born. And so this is our timeline, okay? So the beginning of the world, and different things happened in between here, like Noah and the ark, and David and Goliath, and all these different things. And then Jesus was born, and then he lived his life, and then he died on the cross. And then years and years and years later, other things happened in between here, like our parents were born somewhere in between here, our grandparents. Then I was born in 1996, and then you guys were born a few years later. So this is our timeline, okay? And so because we as humans, we exist on this line here. But now I want you guys to imagine that I am representing God, okay? And now God isn't stuck on this timeline. He's actually outside of it, like I am right now. I'm right here on the timeline as well. But me, my body right now, I am representing God, and I'm outside of time. So he doesn't have to exist on one little part on this timeline. It's not like he had to begin right here and he has to end over here. He's outside of the timeline, and he sees everything happening all at the same time. Whereas in me, I'm living right here in the timeline, and I'm only existing from here until whenever I die. And it's the same with you. You guys are on the timeline, but God is outside of it, and he sees everything that's happening. And so that's how he exists outside of time. God isn't stuck inside of time like we are, because God actually created time. He's the one who made it, and so he is outside of it. So I hope that explains it a little bit more to you guys. It's not a perfect analogy, but that's the idea of how God is outside of time, because he isn't a human being. He isn't stuck in the things that we're stuck in. He is greater than we could ever imagine and more powerful than we could ever imagine. So he actually created time, and he exists outside of it. Now, how does he do this? I have no idea. That's one thing that we're never fully going to understand, because God is God and we are just humans. But that is okay. That is where faith comes in. And we need to take a leap of faith to understand things that we don't fully comprehend or understand. And Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1 actually says this. It says, faith is having confidence in what we hope for and assurance of what we cannot see. And so we can't see God, so we have to put our faith in him. And you know what? We can't see or understand how he can be outside of time, but we have to put our faith and our trust in him. It takes a leap of faith to accept these things because we don't fully understand them. So to answer your question, Olivia, God is outside of time. In fact, he created time. So there is a beginning to the world, and there is going to be an end to the world, and we don't know when that is, but there is no beginning or end to God. He has always been here, and he will always be here, which is so encouraging because it means he's never going to leave us. We don't have to worry about God dying or God ending. He is always going to be with us no matter where we are on this timeline. So I hope that was able to help you understand a little bit more about God and to understand how he has always existed and will always exist. So now we are going to end our time by going and singing one more song, and we're going to sing I've Got the Joy. And I will see you guys next week. Bye.
I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart. I've got the joy, 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 joy down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart to stay. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart, down in my heart. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart.
What else you got?
I've got the peace that passes understanding down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart. I've got the peace that passes understanding down in my heart. Where? Down in my heart to stay. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart, down in my heart. And I'm so happy, so very happy. I've got the love of Jesus in my heart. I've got the wonderful love of my blessed Redeemer way down in the depths of my heart. Where? Down in the depths of my heart. Where? Down in the depths of my heart. I've got the wonderful love of my blessed Redeemer way down in the depths of my heart. Where? Down